So, a very happy Father's Day to everyone who has been my father in previous lives. That's all of you. And also to all of you who are fathers in this life. And to prepare for this talk, I looked up the history of Father's Day in the US. And I learned on Wikipedia that guess what? Father's Day was founded in Spokane, Washington. Yes, at the YMCA in 1910 by a woman named Sonora Smart Dodd. And she was very inspired by the efforts of another woman, I think from Virginia, if I'm not wrong, named Anna Jarvis, who introduced Mother's Day in 1908 to honor the sacrifices of mothers. And for Miss Sonora Dodd, her own mother died in childbirth, and her father was a Civil War veteran who raised 6 children by himself. So you can imagine why Father's Day was so important to her. And at first, she had suggested celebrating Father's Day on June the 5th, which was her father's birthday. But apparently, that year, I think the pastors needed more time to prepare the sermons after Mother's Day, maybe. And so the date of the celebration was pushed to the third Sunday in June. And since then, that's when we've celebrated Father's Day in the US. And interestingly, at first, Father's Day was not a popular holiday. And Sonora Dodd was very persistent, and she worked with trade groups that would benefit from the holiday to promote it, manufacturers of pipes and ties and so on. Yeah, but this had the unintended effect, unfortunately, of causing people to resist the holiday even more because they saw it as an attempt by merchants to benefit from commercial enterprise, especially when Mother's Day had become very commercially successful. It's interesting, like Anna Jarvis actually disavowed Mother's Day eventually because she was so horrified by how commercialized it became, and even asked to remove it from the American calendar. In any case, these trade groups succeeded in making Father's Day quite popular, and it was in 1972 that it became a national holiday. It was signed into law by Richard Nixon. So I think it's interesting, that it took so long for Father's Day to become a national holiday, mainly because of this concern about commercialization, that there's something still that we want to hold kind of sacred, maybe, about our parent-child relationships, right, to prevent them from being sullied by crass commercialism. Yeah, so that's nice. So today I'd just like to share some reflections on what I'm most grateful to my own father for, which is mainly how he chose to work with anger and the impact that had on my life. So my grandfather left China at the age of 15. His own father died, and so suddenly he had to find a way to support himself and his family. And in the 1920s and 30s in China at the time, it was the warlord period, so it was huge political turmoil, everyone fighting over territory, and if you were poor, I think the situation was very bleak. So my grandfather just got on a ship. His elder sister did too, and sailed and survived the journey and found his way to Singapore, which was under British rule at the time. And he found work as a carpenter, because from the age of 12, he had apprenticed with a carpenter for 3 years. My dad said it was a very difficult 3 years of being scolded and beaten a lot by the master. But as a result, he learned a trade, because he was illiterate, couldn't read or write, but he worked very hard. And as a result of his hard work and having some savings, he started his own business. He loaned a lot of raw materials on credit, and he became a contractor. And I'm guessing he was under a lot of pressure because he had 8 children, and that was what he had to put food on the table. And sadly, when he got back from work, he would take his anger out on his family. All his children were terrified of him. That's what I'm hearing from my family stories. And that anger actually had very tragic consequences later on. But growing up in this environment, my own father resolved not to treat his children the same way. So I can actually count on one hand, I think, the number of times my dad raised his voice at us. And the one time I remember was when I was 9 and my sister was 5. And I don't even know what we did, but, Dad blew his top, was yelling. And then 2 of us kind of scuttled away and tried to be good and do our homework quietly. So my dad took a shower. And I remember him coming out of the shower with his hair in a mess. And he was kind of embarrassed. And then he came to us and he said, I'm really sorry for yelling at you. He said, I don't want to talk to my children like that. And I was just completely shocked. It's like adults can apologize? What? It was amazing. And it's funny because when I've told this story, sometimes other adults say, no way, I can't apologize to my kids. They're going to walk all over me. That's just not practical. Which I found this quite surprising that people responded this way, Because I think it's so important that we show our children how to deal with mistakes. Right? We all make mistakes. We're human. The important thing is what we do with them. And if we pretend they don't happen, if we lie about them, or we just insist we're right at all costs, just think about the effect that has on your kids. So for me, I was very grateful that my dad did his best to be honest and accountable, and he set an example that we could follow. Right? People make mistakes. You can apologize, make amends, and move on. And yeah, that was just really helpful. And it wasn't like the house was in chaos and there was no discipline. He just disciplined us without yelling or screaming. And he knew that didn't work. So he did his best to reach us with empathy and reason. Another time I remember being in a very big argument with him was when I was 17 and I was, in my angry with the government phase. Yeah, and he was of the total opposite view, totally pro-Singapore government. So we were in these raging political debates. Yeah, and at the end of one big argument, I was like, I cannot live in the same house as this man anymore. I must move out. We have just such different beliefs. How can we share a roof? Yeah. Then, of course, the next day I had to go to school. And he would give me a ride in the morning because my school was near his workplace. So there I'm in the car, I'm never speaking to you again. Totally sulky, sullen, looking out the window. And then suddenly my dad says to me, I can empathize with what you went through, what you're going through. He said, I've been through the same experience. When I was younger, I was part of leftist student groups, and when your beliefs are in the minority, it's hard. It really hurts. And I was just so shocked to hear this, all the anger just fell away because of his empathy. So he went on to explain how, because Singapore government was trying to clamp down on communism for a while, all the students who were involved with socialist or leftist groups became suspect. He had friends who were interrogated. Many of them couldn't find jobs, especially with the government. And as a result, they suffered because of their beliefs. And I think when the truth about communist China and the Cultural Revolution came out, it was quite devastating for all of them. So looking back, I can see, he was just trying to protect his child, right? Because if you take the path less trodden, if your beliefs are not in the mainstream, it comes at a price, or you have to fight for your voice to be heard. And one time I asked him if he was angry with his own dad. And he said to me, my dad put food on the table. He made sure all his kids receive an education. That's more than what some other people did. And that was that. So I was really quite amazed, given all the things I knew he had gone through as a child. So in closing, I just want to share an article that I read on USA Today, which was entitled, "My pro-Trump father voted against my values. This doesn't make me miss him any less." And it's by a writer named Amanda Sloat. So this Miss Sloat grew up in a Republican family in Michigan, and after living in Europe for 7 years, she returned to the US, a liberal Democrat. And to her father's horror, she worked for the Obama administration. Apparently, the mother and her sister had to stage an intervention to calm him down. And after the 2016 election, she and her father had an even harder time discussing politics. But then she writes, the situation between us humanized the polarization in the country and made me sensitive to how Democratic leaders sometimes portrayed the other side. My dad was undoubtedly a product of his time, but he was not deplorable. He didn't cling to guns, even though his rural upbringing made him skilled with a bullwhip. He didn't cling to religion, and he even wrote a book that sought to help those harmed by the church. So she documents her journey emotionally and working out her relationship, and she decides that preserving her relationship with her father was more important than proving a political point. And that's what motivated her in her work to start to engage across party lines and to talk to people, across the aisle in different community groups as well. And she writes, "Although we didn't always agree, I gained a better understanding of their outlook and hoped that they appreciated mine. By exploring the rich tapestry of American life, I embraced my dad's belief that everyone has value and generally wants what is best for family and country." So her dad passed away recently in a car accident. So she says, "In November 2020, I'll be actively campaigning for the Democratic nominee, but I'll also be wishing that Trump would receive one more vote in Michigan." So I was very moved by how this person tapped into her love for just one person, but that helped her to overcome her attachment. Right? She writes about how With your parents, you expect them to be someone, and they're often not. And that's our attachment at work, her attachment to her own views. And it was this love that inspired her to reach out to others, just on the human level. And for me, I think the biggest lesson I learned from my dad is that all of us have the power to generate love that stops the cycle of anger. And he's living proof to me that if we experience harm, we don't have to respond with anger or pass it on to someone else. Yeah, and it makes such a difference to the next generation. So if we can say that the buck stops here with us and heal from our own anger and replace it with love, then, that makes a tremendous positive impact for everyone we connect with. So with a lot of gratitude to my dad, I know this is possible. And of course, we live in a community where that is our commitment to our practice. So may you today on Father's Day celebrate whatever good qualities you have gained from the people who raised you and continue to bring that forward into your life.